Wherever you place.
Anywhere.
Maybe I should move to the.
You're fine.
Were you talking to Andre? Doing your rounds?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it works. It's a lot. This is next Wednesday. Log in us. Ready? Yeah, so the log on there.
Ready to go. Yeah.
There you go. Ready when you are, sir. All right, we'll call this meeting order. Any public comments? Good. Nobody want to talk to us? Or maybe next time. Are you here for,
Red hat.
Oh. Okay. And I know who you guys are, so. Hearing none, we'll go to item 3, which is AB 25-54, Harvest Fest sponsor. Chip.
Read or I can, or whatever you want to do, Danielle, or I will read the agenda. There, that's great.
The city received an application for sponsorship for the Ording Harvest Festival. The Ording Harvest Festival will be held on Saturday, October 11th, 2025 from 11 to 4 in the main park. Application was complete and received timely. Policy requires that city council review and approve all applications for sponsorship and determine whether an event qualifies for sponsorship. To qualify for sponsorship, an approved event must allow all citizens to reasonably participate, serve a valid municipal purpose, such as strengthening the city's sense of community or celebrating a city's history, and may provide, through increased customers, additional revenues for Ording businesses and subsequent improved tax revenues for the city. Recommendation is to move this forward to study session on July 11th, 2025.
Comments?
I think we have the event organizers.
I just wanted to mention that the location of that event is all 3 parks, North Park, Main Park, and South. Yeah, because I believe you just mentioned Main.
Thank you for clarifying. In all main parks.
This used to be called the Pumpkin Fest?
Correct.
I would $100. That's been a while. Okay, anything else? I said moving on to the study session.
Perfect.
The next one is AB 25-55, Red Hot Hat Day sponsorship.
You're good. Got it, Daniel.
Yes, give me just a moment. Thank you. All right, so this is for the Ording Red Hat Days. Again, the city received an application for sponsorship for Ording Red Hat Days. This will be held on October 4th, 2025. Policy requires that city council review and approve all applications for sponsorship and determine whether an event qualifies for sponsorship. It must allow all citizens to reasonably participate, serve a valid municipal purpose, and increase customers' additional revenues for Ording businesses. Recommended action is to move forward to study session on July 16th.
You only need to speak. Is there any questions, I guess? Yeah, I was just here to answer any questions or clarify anything.
Were there any changes from last year or two?
We are looking into changing per PD, I think, request, to not requesting Calistoga to be closed. So we would focus on closing Washington for the full festival and potentially portions of Vanscoya for the full festival, and then still requesting potentially after this, me and Michelle haven't fully discussed, but a portion of where like the farmers market is, just for overflow cars, because the car show has gotten so big. I think that's a result of the Kingston leaving. And so we're really worried about overflow. Last year we had 260 something cars, and just nowhere to put them, which resulted in quite a headache, I think, for the police department. Which I think is why they recommended closing Washington. I haven't gotten with DOT yet on a full day closure of the highway. They are used to a 1 hour, 2 hour closure. So I was gonna follow up with that pending approval, I guess, on Michelle and PD's part.
I just got a question. I haven't been to Red Hat Day in a long time. You guys still do the jail where you put them in jail, then you have to.
Yeah, the jail truck isn't as popular, and also it's a huge liability, as you probably are aware. So we've modified it quite a bit for our insurance company's recommendation. And so we've modified that, and it'll be more like a hayride going forward. And that's what it was last year. We had kind of side by side, a little trailer setup situation. We're working on a waiver for that as well. Yeah, so we still do the jail truck. We've added a car show. We do vendors. We've done, as of the last couple of years, we're doing scholarships now. We hosted our first Hunter's Education Safety course just a couple weeks ago. We had 7 kids. We had like 20 kids wanting to do it, but because we did it right at the end of the school year, vacations kind of interrupted. So we had intended to host 2 classes, but we only host 1.
To see for your mission in action there.
Yeah, so we're doing really, really well and trying to go back to giving back to the community. We had a hard, probably 5 years with COVID and things like that. So yeah, we're trying to bring it back and give back to the community. We gave 2 scholarships for $1,000 to 2 students at the high school for biotech, which is a diesel mechanic school in Wyoming. And yeah, our focus is technical skills, technical schools, and trades. So yeah.
Insurance company took the fun out of it.
Yeah, as they usually do, unfortunately.
Well, the biggest thing, was the Red Hat Day. Lots of fun.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants us to bring back like the bed races and stuff like that, but
Bed races? What's that?
yeah, they used to do like hospital bed races, and then they did like yeah, and they did potty races. Sorry for my language. Meeting, but it was local fire departments would all get together and like organize a wheeled like commode, and race down the road. Again, something that our insurance company is not super thrilled about, so we don't put that.
Had to mix the commode races.
Yeah.
It's
So
over years.
Mm,
We're still planning to have the parade to kind of culminate and end
Um,
our show, or what do you?
yes, the board is divided. The parade is obviously not super large parade anymore, which is unfortunate because there's not a lot of community participation, but we do get, probably 12 entrance. And it's something that the event has held historically for, you know, it's the 75th anniversary this year, by the way. It started in 1950. There's been some breaks, over the years. There's been, you know, some times where the board has fizzled out because we're all volunteers. So it hasn't been 75 consecutive events, but it is the 75th anniversary. So, yeah, the parade is something that we're trying to hold on to because it's something that's happened every year consecutively. But it is hard because parades, a lot of volunteers, which we have, we're building that bank up, but, yeah, it's hard to recruit people who want to participate in October.
Yes, definitely. So I recommend we do move this on to the study session.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember.
Questions on that? Nope. Two festivals that have been around for a long time, and let's stick around for a while. All right, the next one is AB 25-10. No, this one, AB 25-20, or the municipal code update.
Okay, I'll take this one. Thank you. Yeah, we're here to be able to kind of initiate the presentation of a substantial amount of effort being undertaken by the staff. This is a voluntary rewrite of a number of titles in the Ording Municipal Code. It is not something that is required or governed by RCW, kind of like what we saw last year with the comprehensive plan. But this is something that's just been recognized for a number, for some time, and has also been represented as part of council's goals is to get the municipal code updated within 2025. And so we're working to be able to accommodate that end. And because this is a pretty substantial amount of work, we thought that it would be best to kind of begin piecemeal presenting this to CGA, and then ask to bring this to study sessions and to council meetings, in, like I said, a bit more of a piecemeal fashion rather than all at once, because we are talking about titles 1, 10, 12, 13, and 15 as a part of this effort, and separately Title 11 is a critical areas ordinance, and that will be that's also on the agenda today, but that's a separate matter that's also being updated for compliance with the comprehensive plan. So as I said, because the endeavor is substantial, we just don't want to overburden the council, and so wanted to kind of start bringing this to the CGA's attention now. And so in the packet today are revisions that staff has worked on for titles 1 and 12. These have gone through an interdisciplinary staff review by myself and the city administrator, the chief of police, the public works director, and the city clerk. And then we've also had this reviewed by the city attorney. And so the revisions that you see in your packet today are a reflection of all of that culminating effort. And I'll just highlight what I think are, some kind of noteworthy edits that you'll see in your packet today. Eventually, the ask for today's item is for this to move forward to the study session on the 16th, and then for a public hearing to be held on Title 12 on the 30th of July before council's dark month in August. So I'll go through a couple of those kind of noteworthy items that I've made note of. If we're looking at page 70 of the agenda packet, you'll see that this is in Title 1, that there are some adjustments that have been made to the discussion of monetary penalties for civil infraction violations. Right now, our code has this adopted classification system that is pretty confusing to administer. It's inconsistently represented throughout the code. It identifies civil infractions in a class 1 through 4 system. Because of the inconsistency in its representation and its inconsistency with RCW, we work with the chief of police just to kind of represent all civil infractions as just one classification. It just is a civil infraction, and a civil infraction comes with a $250 penalty associated with it. So we've just removed the classification system. On page 76 of your packets, you'll also note that there's a question that's been written for council's discussion and a couple of other edits related to the administration of council meetings. Right now, there's a portion of our code that specifies that study sessions, if they land on a holiday, that those meetings will be held at the same hour on the next succeeding day that's not a holiday. That's not really our practice in ordering. We could think about the Thanksgiving holiday as a good example of that. And so instead, we've recommended that, we typically kind of sort this out at the annual adopted meeting, or at the scheduled meeting that we adopt annually at the beginning of the year. And so we've just recommended that edit. And then there's also a section on this page that asks for city council to, or it states that city council may attend regular meetings by telephone or video, provided that a quorum of council be at the location of the regular meeting for the duration of the meeting. I left a question of this because I don't believe that that is our typical practice either. I think that council may have appetite to allow for a quorum to be met, even if council is attending virtually. But I'm looking for a little bit of direction from council on whether it wants to codify that. Moving on to page 81 of the packet. I just wanted to make note of this because it looks like there's a tremendous amount of content that's being deleted that otherwise is important because it discusses things like compensating for time off for staff and care of city property. There's a lot of content in this section that's deleted, and it's deleted because there is more updated favorable language in our personnel policy. And so rather than attempting to represent this content in two places, especially because this has a tendency to become outdated so quickly, it's just been the recommendation of the city administrator that we delete this section of the code and refer to our personnel policy instead. And then the last bit in Title I that I wanted to make specific note of is on page 97. And page 97 discusses the appropriate appeal body for judicial action that's taken. So there's a discussion under appeal section number 2, and what previously had been regarded as city council's review of appeals that are made to the hearing examiner for a notice of civil violation, we're now recommending be an appeal that is heard by Pierce County Superior Court. It's just the guidance of the city attorney that when a judicial when an appeal is made judicially, that it remain within the judicial system. And so if the hearing examiner issues a decision on a civil violation and that decision is appealed, it should remain within the judicial system, and the appeal should be heard by Pierce County Superior Court rather than city council. And so that's all I've captured in my notes as being, I think, kind of particularly relevant or of interest related to edits that we've recommended for Title I. And if there's no questions, I'll just roll right into some other noteworthy items that I took down for Title 12, which is also in the packet. If we move to page 123 of the packet, it discusses the authority for certain decisions that are governed by Title 12 of the Municipal Code. This generally discusses subdivisions, but it also discusses things like binding site plans, plats, boundary line adjustments, things of that nature. The city staff is recommending an adjustment to the decision maker for final plats, preliminary plats, and binding site plans. Final plats are have already been captured as an administrative decision, but we're recommending that binding site plans and preliminary plats be decisions that are made administratively rather than decisions that are made legislatively. And we can certainly discuss some of the thinking around that. It would still remain that preliminary and final planned unit developments or PUDs would still remain a decision that's with the city council, but preliminary plats and binding site plans we're recommending to be administratively decided on, which is supported by RCW and is a practice that's carried out by other Western Washington communities. Moving on to page 134 of the packet. This is just a cleanup item that is important for us to incorporate that I wanted to make note of. This is in terms of criteria for approval for boundary line adjustments. And it's kind of the thicker, red underlined text portion in the middle of the page. It describes insufficient area and dimensions of boundary line adjustments. Right now, our code stipulates correctly that we cannot create a lot through a BLA process or redefine a lot through a BLA process if it would create a lot that's not consistent with our dimensions and area minimum standards. And that is accurate, but only so far as as long as a non-conforming lot is not involved. So just to explain a bit more context about how I've seen this apply in the past, sometimes non-conforming lots are already non-conforming to those dimensions. And a true application of this standard would mean that lot could never be reconfigured through a BLA because it wouldn't be possible for it to be able to become conforming. And we can't overwhelm state issued non-conforming rights for existing non-conforming lots that way. So this is just a way to be able to clean up a section and protect the city from any sort of future litigation on that sort of matter. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight is on page 137, and it discusses an important sort of hole in the code that we've seen before. It discusses frontage improvements, particularly as it relates to short plats. Short plats, just like regular plats, are still expected to be able to provide for the public good. And that includes frontage improvements. And so where our code right now is silent on the discussion of frontage improvements and other sort of public components of a short plat, we've inserted some language to be able to ensure that it's well understood that there are those requirements applicable for creation of lots of 9 or fewer lots in addition to larger plats. With that, that's everything that I took down as being particularly noteworthy changes in Titles 1 and 12. I'm happy to address any questions. Again, the ask here is that a more substantive presentation of this content can be provided at the study session on the 16th and again on the 30th at a public hearing for Title 12. Title 1 does not require a public hearing.
That's a lot.
It is.
And they still have, when we have 5 council members and stuff, it's like, wait a minute, that changed a long time ago.
Yeah.
But that needs to be changed. So you want to bring it in it would be good, it is a good idea to bring it, I don't think, throw all of it at once, because that's a lot. It's
Right.
like a meeting longer than it needs to be. We could piece it out, would be great. That way because you're gonna have some comments.
Right.
So, I think piecing it out would be a good idea, so we can have the council come up with any comments, any suggestions, so we can, you can slice the pie a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So right now we're proposing to bring both of these titles to study session, and then Title 12 to its public hearing on the 30th. And then there are still other titles that we haven't even begun to dig into. Titles 13 and 15 are also going to be coming in front of council this year. And so that's again a part of the sort of piecemealed effort is to bring those back to CGA and study sessions kind of separately because they are fairly hefty, titles.
Okay. I agree. I think the next one should AB 251 review.
Okay, I'm going to pull up a presentation for this one.
You guys know how many sessions we came up with to get small town big view?
I don't even want to know. It's probably half a year would be my guess.
We got the golf course.
Huh?
We had our offsite meeting, yeah.
Hmm.
Dick was there and Cheryl and all those guys were there. Took us half the day just to get that.
Is that like back in 2008 or 9 or so?
Mhm.
7, 8, 9, somewhere in there? Okay.
You should see what it was supposed to be.
Huh. What was the original idea?
Small town, it was small town, small valley, in the valley or something like that.
Hmm.
I was like,
Huh.
no, let's make it, then we came out and said, hey, let's make a big view, we got a beautiful view of the mountain. And that's when we came up with small town, big view.
Huh.
Couple of them mostly done.
Okay, I'll go ahead and present this one as well. This presentation is in your packet, and this is for the Critical Areas Ordinance. This is for a revision of Title 11 of our municipal code. I'll go ahead and I'm going to be as brief as possible about this because this is something that, again, we're asking to bring to the study session on the 16th and have a public hearing on this matter. And so I'll just give a more complete, I guess, presentation of this content later, but do want to make you aware of what we're asking to bring. We're required by state law under the Growth Management Act to update our critical areas ordinance. It's a component of our comprehensive plan update that we have to have. We're technically in compliance with our obligations under the GMA as long as we have our critical areas ordinance updated within 12 months after adoption of our comprehensive plan, which, as you'll recall, was done in December of 2024. But we, recognize that there's, typically a fairly hefty Q4 legislative calendar for our council. And so not to overburden that with this effort, we're hoping to be able to finalize this effort at the end of July before the dark month in August. So we are required to do this under state law, but we also have a few other reasons locally, kind of among our administrative office for doing this. We have an absence of industry best practices. We note that there's a number of redundancies that should be removed, and there's a lot of opportunities to be able to add clarity and improve the understanding of our CAO for applicants and for staff for administering the CAO. And so for those reasons, we're bringing this project forward. The RCW, like I said, does require that we participate in a critical areas ordinance update. It also states that any city that is a PUG, that's a periodic update grant awardee, has to move through the checklist that you see on your screen right here to be able to kind of demonstrate how it is that our critical areas ordinance has been revised to be compliant with all requirements of law. And so we've moved through that effort. We've completed that checklist. It's also in your packet. Some of the best practices that we are incorporating, they are required by state law, but it's also just good for our own, defensibility of our work here, protection of our critical areas. It supports our third-party critical area reviewer to be able to have context in the code against which they review against. And it helps applicants to be able to understand, how it is they need to prepare their materials to be successful here. Those best practices are generally referred to in 3 different camps. We have no net loss, mitigation sequencing, and best available science. No net loss of ecological impact refers to the fact that if you are engaging in development activity in our community and your activity is going to have a negative impact on our critical areas, that there is some sort of mitigation that your project is incorporating that allows for there not to be a net loss of that critical area impact. So, and you build within the wetland buffer, but then you enhance the wetland buffer in another section, and the net effect is that there was no loss of the buffer. Mitigation sequencing is also required to be brought into our code. It's currently not in our code. It requires that whenever you are mitigating for an impact to a critical area, that you move through it in the sequence that's listed on the sheet right here. So you first have to prove that you've attempted to avoid any interaction with the critical areas, with the critical area at hand, and then move through all of the sequencing until you're able to show that there was no opportunity to avoid or minimize or rectify. You had to have an impact, and therefore you are compensating and monitoring the effects of that compensatory mitigation. And then best available science. Best available science is really broadly interpreted in state law, and that works to the impact works to the benefit of an applicant and towards staff, because it allows for us to pull from a broad range of ways that best available science can be interpreted. And that, kind of, it doesn't pigeonhole staff or an applicant into, one way about going about showing that they've exercised reasonable science to be able to inform the work that they're conducting. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. This is an example from the RCW and the WAC that showcases how best available science is sourced. And so you can see that it can be sourced from things like research and modeling, but not from things like anecdotal information or opinions of non-experts or hearsay. So if you were to research the presence of grizzly bears in Ording, then you could be able to, showcase that there was data collected from a controlled experiment by experts in their field, and be able to make a showing for whether or not there's a presence of grizzly bears. That sort of thing would be perfectly fine for best available science. It would not be sufficient to say Kim Gunderson said that there's probably not a grizzly bear in town, and so therefore we can conclude assuredly that there are no grizzly bears, because I'm not an expert on grizzly bear presence. And this sort of broad application of best available science really works well in practice. And I'll just give an example of a project of mine. This is the Seven Seas Tap Room and Marina in Gig Harbor. You can see that the project itself is a waterfront project. It included the new marina that's shown in this image, and I'll just point out the dock and pier next to the marina right here that you can kind of see on the screen that I'm circling with my cursor. That dock belongs to a private property owner adjacent to the Seven Seas tap room. And this person came to the public hearing with concerns about the critical areas report that was prepared for the Seven Seas project, stating that, when they went through revitalizing their dock, they understood there to be a substantial amount of submerged aquatic vegetation that would otherwise limit the ability for Seven Seas to build a new marina on their site. But Seven Seas was able to use best available science in their critical areas report to be able to showcase that there was no concern for presence of submerged aquatic vegetation. This is actually pulled from their critical areas report, and it showcases that submerged aquatic vegetation is at depths too deep in this area to be recommended by the Department of Natural Resources as possibly being impacted by boat scour, which is the only negative impact associated with submerged aquatic vegetation. Actually, in deeper waters, the interaction between boats and submerged aquatic vegetation is actually viewed to have a positive impact on the vegetation, because it kind of moves all of the sediment around the submerged aquatic vegetation. And so being able to use this, like I said, this broad application of best available science actually worked to the benefit of the applicant and staff in being able to administer the sufficiency of their critical areas report. The hearing examiner weighed in favor of the project, and it was able to be constructed without any sort of need for additional mitigation to the aquatic environment. And then here I've listed a number of examples of changes that we've made in the critical areas ordinance to kind of wrap all of this up. There was some redundancies in the discussion of transfer of development rights, which we got rid of. There are a lot of terms that were defined that were otherwise unused in the critical areas ordinance that we're recommending be deleted. We've added clarity to other definitions where it needs to be specified that things like fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas don't include things like artificial ditches or irrigation delivery systems, which we do have in town and shouldn't be regulated as critical areas. And we've added a lot of context around what we understand to be the expectation of a critical areas report in our community. If you're going to be interacting or developing on land that has a critical area feature, there needs to be a report about it, and the report needs to have some specificity about what we expect to see come in the door, or it can be hard for our third-party reviewer to have an understanding against what they need to be reviewing an applicant's materials against. We've moved through all of our administrative obligations. We've noticed this to the public and to all all state agencies. I'll be really brief with the feedback that we got. We only received feedback from state agencies, nobody in the general public. We got feedback from DNR and ecology that were both really helpful and contributed towards some beneficial improvements to our critical areas ordinance update. We also got feedback from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Some of their content was helpful. Other content from them was really unhelpful. They made a recommendation that the city adopt their use of what's called a 200-year-old site potential tree tool. It's a new GIS mapping system that they've created that attempts to be able to envision what the height of a tree would have been if it were 200 years old in Ording based off of where it's planted and what kind of tree it would be, and that a buffer for a critical area in that area should match the 200-year height of the tree. You can see I've used the tool in different areas in Ording. You can see that in some areas they say that there might be a 105-foot tree, and so the buffer should be 105 feet. In other areas it should exceed 200 feet. It's confusing and inconsistent with a lot of other aims and goals and policies that have been issued by the state. And so I just prepared a statement back to the WDFW that says, effectively, thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to implement that here. And we could talk about that more if you'd like to as well. Other than that, that pretty much wraps up my presentation. I know that it was brief, but I intend to give a deeper presentation at the study session on the 16th if it can be moved to that date, and then follow up with a public hearing on the 30th.
15th and 30th.
16th and 30th.
So moved.
Director Gunderson, did you mention that Planning Commission recommended adoption by council?
I should have. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, this has been taken to a public hearing in front of Planning Commission, and they do recommend that the critical area ordinance update be adopted as it's written by City Council.
Any other one? Next one, AB 25-51. Parking code.
Okay, this one will be really, really brief. So back in February, council approved a interim control for parking regulations downtown. You'll recall that we created code to apply for 6 months, and that code provided a 50% reduction in parking requirements within the MUTC zone for most commercial businesses. The cause for the interim control was to be able to create an opportunity to kind of remove barriers that we recognize off-street parking requirements have had for the establishment or the growth of existing businesses in downtown Ording. And so we have implemented that interim control. And what staff is requesting is to be able to extend the interim control for another 6 months. This is something, again, that I'm asking to be able to be brought back to a public hearing on the 30th of July, which is required by RCW for any extensions of an interim control. For every 6 months, you have to have another public hearing. But we just don't feel like there's been enough time yet to be able to observe the impacts of the interim control. The effort is ultimately to see whether the interim control is something that staff and that the city wants to apply permanently. And we just haven't had the time yet to be able to observe how this plays out, whether there are businesses that are going to establish or grow as a result of the reduction in off-street parking requirements, and whether reliance on that sort of new code is going to have detrimental impacts to our public infrastructure. We've taken efforts so far to be able to kind of administer more carefully the appropriate use of the right-of-way for parking. And so our hope is just to kind of continue to be able to take on these actions and watch applications come through the door for development within the MUTC zone, and see if there's any sort of negative impacts that would lead us to believe that the interim control is actually ineffective or a detriment to public welfare. So for that reason, and because this expires during August, when council's on its dark month, we're requesting to be able to have a public hearing and extend this interim control for 6 months at the July 30th meeting.
Will that give you enough time? If you extend it to 6 months?
We can extend it for another 6 months after that, if it's not enough time. We can't extend it for longer than
Okay.
6 months. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe move to the study session. All righty. Next one is AB 25-18, safe parking. Did we do anything on that one? Mr. Gunther?
It's with Councilmember Gunther, and we've not heard anything. I've not heard anything. Okay. And so, yeah, with us not having heard anything, I think that, we can table this item until the next CGA meeting as well.
Yeah, I'll send him an email and see. if he can- I know he's been busy with his new job, but see can he speed it up or does he have anything for us or not, so. We can either take it off until, I'll say take it off until we have something, but just leave it there for now. Let me send him an email and see what his response is.
Gotcha.
Next one on the list is AB 25-43.
Good morning. I'll take that one. So that is for the, what's that?
On the side of this.
Okay, yeah, so this is for the Foothills Trail realignment and safety enhancements project design. So in 2023, the city competed for a grant from the Puget Sound Regional Council. The grant was for realignment of the regional Foothills Trail from west side to east side of the park, creating a safer and more efficient multimodal trail and recreational environment to reduce the user conflict between the disparate park and the green space users and trail users by strategically shifting to avoid perpendicular crossings and conflicts with pedestrians, cyclists, and other trail users, to improve wayfinding for easier navigation through the park, enhance safety and park experience for all users, and efficient utilization of park lands and other program elements. It's also a component of the Main Parks Master Plan. So when I got here, I got the funds obligated and we put a request for qualifications out in March, and we received 5 statement of qualifications. After a competitive procurement process, McLeod Record was selected as the highest ranked firm. So their fee is $225,801, which is a little bit higher than what we received in grant funding. So we do need a $70,000 budget amendment to cover the design portion. The construction is likely to be a little higher as well. The application underestimated the project scope and it didn't include some of the elements that really need to be in there. So that's why it's a little bit lower. We did ask the PSRC if they have any funds that are to be reobligated that they consider ordering as possibly receiving some of those funds. We won't know that until August. And in the meantime, and if we don't end up getting more funds from PSRC, the city can cover the $70,000 out of the general fund. So that's what we're doing. We'd like to move the trail from the west side of the park to the east side, closer to Washington. And that the first part will be the design. So we have to have it designed and the construction funding obligated by June 1st of 2026. So that's what the project is.
Don't mess with the barbecue stuff out there. That's
The barbecue stuff.
Not gonna touch it.
Nope.
It's 7 years, that's, no. I think this is a good idea. You might have a hard time explaining why you need the extra money. That's gonna be a concern, but I think it's it needs another makeover. The last makeover was done a while back, so I say move it, let's see where we go, because I think it's gonna make Whiting downtown beautiful.
Okay, I'll be ready at study session to talk about why we need the extra money. Okay, thank you.
I think it's also important to, this was one of the projects identified in the Main Parks Master Plan that we went through a couple years ago. And so this is, us continuing to progress that plan that we got feedback from the public on. And, just to toot our own horns a little bit here, we've had some pretty good luck with the plan so far. Obviously, we're working on realigning the trail, which we have dollars for. But also this last year, I know the mayor mentioned at a prior study session, we received a little over $1 million in funding to add additional play courts in the charter park area, which was also part of the master plan, as well as the bathrooms continues to make progress. And then the developers developing a portion of the charter park as well, out there as well. So I'd say the plan is making some really good progress, and we've raised over $2 million off of that plan for direct benefit to the community in the last couple of years. So I'm happy and excited. So
It's gonna, that make the downtown area kind of pop.
Yep,
That's what it's going.
exactly. That's the goal.
It's, I mean, it needs a makeover.
Yep.
So I think that it's gonna look real nice.
Yep. And there's a lot of good chatter on social media over the last several days about splash pads. There seems to be a real desire in the community for some sort of water feature for folks to play in. And moving this trail starts to free up space on kind of the west side of the park for something like a water park, which was, not a water park, a splash pad, which was part of one of the features identified as part of the main parks master plan. And, for anyone that picks this meeting up later, we don't have funding to implement a splash pad right now. But, we're making progress towards being able to get or to have the ability to ask for that funding at some point in the next couple of years.
But like most community has that where the kids can run up in the water and stuff.
Yeah.
My kids still always use the hose.
My kids use the sprinkler too, so.
I thought I'd add really quickly too, just on the point of fiscal responsibility. It's just noteworthy also tooting our own horns. The delta previously had been larger than $70,000 between what McLeod had originally quoted for the work and the work that we have authorized to be able to spend on this. The delta had been larger. Staff very, very diligently scrutinized and questioned the consultant on the cost that they had prepared and put together on the estimate for the project, and have seen a reduction in the amounts of tens of thousands of dollars from the quote that they originally proposed for the project, given our scrutiny and our call for a lot of the components of the scoped work to be removed or reduced significantly. So we can certainly look at incorporating that into the discussion of the need for the additional funding and how we've been really diligent stewards of public dollars to kind of bring that down to as minimal of a request as could be possible.
It'd be a good idea to put that in there, how it was this, now it's this, and how much money we're saved, and this is gonna bring it to the point of finishing.
Mhm. Yeah, it was 30,000. It was a real team effort on the city's part. And thank you to
Definitely.
Kim.
Hear your story.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for adding that.
All right. Yeah, bring it on to the study session and see where we go.
Thank you.
The next AB 25-05.
It looks like it's me. Hold on, trying to find our what page is this on? Such a long packet here. Jeez Louise. Okay, there we go. Okay, city facility discussion. Okay, so staff have made some progress on city facilities that are, somewhat surplus to our current needs over the last month and a half. So a couple of updates. We've prepared a RFP for forestry management services for the dump parcel. And so in the next couple of days, probably early next week, we're going to publish that. So in September at this meeting, hopefully we'll have a proposal for the CGA to review on that matter. In addition to the dump parcel, we've got a couple other water sources that have some mature timber on them that we want to look at to see if it'd be worth the effort to harvest and get a few extra dollars for our water fund. So we're going to have, we've added that to the scope for the RFP process. Where that goes, I don't know, but I think there's a good chance we'll be able to raise some dollars from our old dump parcel from the timber there and then replant it for future harvest. So that's exciting. And then secondly, the old city shop, which is at the end of at the bend of Calistoga as you're heading towards the Calistoga Bridge, adjacent to the PSC substation. Originally, we were looking at moving towards a sale of that property. However, as I've been in discussions with our public works team, they've identified that as a potential laydown yard for the Kansas reconstruction project and have requested that we don't move to surplus that property right at the moment and that we hold it until at least the conclusion of the Kansas project. So my recommendation to council is kind of twofold. Is one, staff do no further work on working on a plan to surplus that facility. And two, right now, the shop, that old shop building is leased to the Chamber of Commerce for storing the community float. If we use that site as a laydown yard for the Kansas project, it will block the float from being accessible. That's in the building. And so my proposal would be to give notice to the chamber that they need to find a new home for the float. If we give it to them now, that should give them plenty of time to relocate the float, in the next several months before either we need it or they need to start putting a float together for the Daffodil Parade and whatever other parades they participate in. So I think for that one, we should probably bring that to the study session so that the whole council is aware, since that's going to probably be a bit of a point of kind of public interest. But the dump, I can certainly mention it at a study session, but I think that's just moving the ball on some process there. Perfect. Okay, so we'll have an update at the study session on those.
So they mentioned the lay down lot, but I think they can put a lot of traffic on Calistoga, won't they? Once they start big heavy trucks.
Yeah, I mean, it'll impact traffic on Calistoga to some extent. But I think, I guess maybe Ashley, you could speak to what they would use a laydown yard for.
Well, they're gonna be replacing a lot of utilities. So they'll have all the pipes that they'll need a place. So as they get the equipment in, they'll need a place to put their stuff that they're gonna be putting in the ground. They would have that for the laydown area. They probably will have some big equipment they'll want to park over there. And they will go across Calistoga, but it'd probably be just in the morning to get across and then in the afternoon to get back. But it would just be whatever underground utility piping is going in would need a place to store until they could get it in the ground.
I should give you my complaints now, right? That's my mom.
Is it?
Speak your piece.
Keep it going right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, laydown yard's gonna have to go somewhere. if
Yeah.
we're gonna complete that project. So, we're certainly open to ideas. I mean, we don't. We just identified it as the one that the city already owns. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
What's that?
Not people.
Sorry,
Not on the. Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, we can move that on. The next one is AB 25-70 Council Road. I think that's just a need to know.
Yep, just our regular update. Let me see here. I'll just mention anything that's progressing. Mentioned before on the White Hawk Gratzer Master Park Plan, we did receive an appropriation from the state. We haven't gotten notice from Commerce yet of that. But once we do, we'll probably start putting together a request for qualifications. Likely that work won't start until like late winter or early next year. Other than that, I've already identified one of the folks that's running for council in, this year that's running unopposed. We're going to get a council, new council member packet out to him, Mr. Reed. So we're already getting some traction out of that product. So that's exciting. So other than that, I don't have any other updates.
All right. Next one, to approve the minutes. Just me, so I guess we can approve. And 5, action items.
Yeah.
I have a question, is it Kansas City? No, Kansas, I think that road is supposed to finish. That, been working on it for a while. I think it-
White Hawk?
What's going on with that?
Oh,
Sure, I'll take that one. So White Hawk Boulevard Extension it's so close to being through its federal obligations. So we had to move through NEPA for that project, and we also had to move through what's called ESA Consultation Section 7, and that's Endangered Species Act. And so we had to move through 2 federal agencies to be able to close that out. We are done with our NEPA obligations. We are through with our ESA Section 7 consultation with one of those agencies, and we're like 98% through with the other agency. And we should have that wrapped up by July 10th. We owe something back to the federal government no later than a week from tomorrow. And with that, we should see a culmination of our federal obligation. And so that was great because it closes out, and it means that, then we're just moving on to local and state sort of obligations. Because we're done with NEPA, it also means that we're able to start doing some property negotiations and looking at right of way. And so I think that we're moving forward with that. But my understanding is also that we don't have obligated funding. And so there's some, right? Is that right? Yeah. So because there's not an obligation of funding, there's a bit of a pause in the project until we get that sorted out. We also know that I'm still going to look at Scott to describe this better. I don't have this down yet. The PSRC tip thing. So it went through the federal approval to be allowed to be issued by PSRC, but PSRC still hasn't authorized it specifically for our project yet. Did I get that?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just working through the kind of bureaucratic process of
Okay.
becoming part of the PSRC and then the State Transportation Improvement
Yeah.
Program, which then allows us to start applying for funding for right of way and then eventually construction of the project.
So we've been allowed by the federal government, PSRC has been allowed by the feds to list our project as being allowed to receive funding. So we've got that thumbs up, but not the thumbs up from PSRC that we're actually going to receive funding. And if we get that, then we can start looking at things like right-of-way acquisition and any sort of private property wheeling and dealing that needs to occur for that. All overall, good progress. I think that we've been stuck on this project in the federal wheelhouse forever, it seems, but a lot of good traction over the last few months on the project. Yeah, a long time, but the last few months have brought a lot of good traction.
Good. It's been on that first came out in 1999.
Yeah.
Wow. That's ugly.
No, that's like, what happened to it?
Yeah.
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 The city likes these long drawn out projects like the bridge, White Hawk. So
Any final comments? And the meetings will now be on the same routine schedule, so we'll have another one on August 3rd.
well,
Skipping August.
I guess it would be up to you and your co-chair.
I thought we discussed at the last meeting that we would skip August.
Maybe we did. Did we
Okay.
decide that?
so.
Okay, got it. Yeah, you're right.
Unless something comes up and we do need it, but.
That's
for
right.
now,
Okay.
we're
Yep.
canceled.
So no August. We'll be back in September. Yep.
We adjourn.
Thank you.